Now it's starting with Christian starting the recording.
Well, we need a Christian. Okay, so do you want to roll back? So we're not.
Let's set the stage briefly. So we use the time because today we don't have any agenda set and no chairs around. We use the time to have a discussion on Laos.
Yeah, and we're not actually quorate. So that would be, yes, there's only 6 of us.
Yeah, so it's more of a technical conversation on Laos with you having had time to kind of look at the SIP. Neil nods too, maybe Duncan nods too, so he also had a time to look at it. I think I'm going to be a proxy for the R&D team as I was involved. I'm a co-author there. I can comment on some things, but sometimes we might need to kind of say, I need to gather more information.
Right, so post the conversation last week, and of other conversations with people, started looking at the likely detailed behavior of the proposed linear Laos. And as Johnny has just put in the commentary, I mean, I talked to my colleague Peter because I'm Welsh. I do much better sort of in a bardic setting, right? Than actually sitting down writing paper. I'm not very good at doing that. We discussed the fact that it is the way in which the thing is currently formulated is it's doing lots of work that it's going to throw away, and this is not a good thing for a large system. It's not good systems engineering, and this is likely to cause issues. Right. So how do we quantify some of those issues? And one of the issues I believe that's going to happen is that for a large portion of the behavioral time, that if you were to compare a Preos with the same basic parameters with the linear Laos with the same basic parameters, the linear Laos will have longer delays, possibly, I mean, longer delays and spend a lot more effort doing that than if you just had Preos by itself.
Okay. Let's maybe be a bit more precise on some of the things. So you mentioned wasting work. What kind of work you're saying there? And you're saying longer delays. The delay between what? So
the wasted work is the EBs being thrown away, right?
Yes.
They're produced, but then
and all the voting there for yes.
So that means the EB, which is basically disseminated, which is an endorsed sequence of transaction references, that is basically cannot be used as is. It needs to be re-announced, and any voting which happened will need to kind of redone.
Yeah, it's more than that, right? But yes, basically that's what I'm saying.
No, it's not more than that.
It's a lot more. Oh yes, it's actually worse than that. That's part of the problem. I'm going to do the initial case first of all before I start talking about how to attack it, right? Because I can see a whole bunch of attacks as well. But let's do the initial one first of all, right? So it goes like this. At the point at which you have a mempool, and basically if the mempool, if everything fits inside an RB's worth, i.e. a Preos block, then basically the system behaves just like it's like Preos. It never issues an AB.
Correct. Yeah.
Johnny, do you want to jump in here?
Well, I was going to do the summary myself, but you're doing it, so never mind.
Right, fine. Okay, right. So now,
which is a desirable property, right? So whatever we have, it should just behave the same way as today.
No, that's a meta argument. I'm not going to make a value judgment on that decision. Right, because what I'm saying is this is its behavior, right? Let's start with the behaviors, right? I'm not trying to justify any of the behaviors. I'm just to describe them.
Okay.
This is really important because otherwise you need to get to that end point where you understand the beat. Right? So if the block, if the amount in the mempool is more than that, then you basically turn around and you construct an EB. Now, let's consider the first case is that there's an RB's worth plus half an EB's worth, half another basic block size, just to put some numbers on it, right? Not an arbitrary number, but a fixed number, which is 50% extra, okay?
50% of the what could go into a Prowse block, or 50% what could go into an EB block.
50% of what could go into a Prowse block, right?
Okay.
So this is
Okay, so it's basically just barely more than what can basically be processed with Prowse today. Like
well, actually, well, no, that's okay. No, barely more is not actually the right way to talk about.
I mean, we're talking like 50% more than the limit
I'm just
today,
talking,
right?
Yeah, but what I'm trying to say here is I'm going to consider various cases,
Mhm.
right? I'm breaking it down. This is one case, right?
Yeah.
Now,
And just to be clear, I want to summarize, right? The proposed parameterization of the SIP is the capacity which can go into Prowse, and the capacity which can go into such an EB, right? So we're talking a kind of like, it's not 50% more, right? It's more like 5,000% more. So we're like 50x or so, which can go into an EB more than what can go into a Prowse.
so Sebastian, I got to hold you there because actually, were you to do that, I believe the system would collapse, right?
Yeah, but so, you're judging now, right? So basically, you're talking. Like, I'm just saying the capacity which can go into an EB is.
The point is, what I'm trying to do here is slowly build up an argument which everybody basically makes sense, right? I'm trying to avoid the sort of grandstanding statements about what he could do, what it can. All I'm trying to do here is to say this is the way it would behave from the way you've done the protocol. Parrot, next. Yeah.
Hey, sorry, at the risk of becoming PE number one, just wanted to suggest some improvement as far as the over talking. I know you guys are excited, and I don't want to change who you are, but let's use the hands and demonstrate the right things for committees, especially since these recordings do get published.
Okay, right. So, I will, as you can see, I will yield when requested. Right? Okay, here we go. So, so let's go. We now got an RB Prowse block size and a half. Now, therefore, an EB will be generated, and that EB will start to be propagated. Right? Now, the system can evolve at that point in two ways. There's two broad categories of system evolution at that point. The first one is in the time permitted for and required for the EB to be sorted, disseminated, voted upon, the votes cast and settled, right? Which, according to the SIP, is 15 seconds. We'll take that, right? Right. That basically,
14.
So
14 is the parameterization, which is the minimum time between two RBs to be using the certificate, right? You will have the certificate way before, but basically this is the minimum time you need to be able to use it.
That's the minimum time. Okay, right. So 14, it turns out makes no difference, 14 or 15 seconds.
Yeah.
Basically, at 14 seconds, the Poisson arrival schedule says you will wait 14 seconds or more, less than 50% of the time.
Correct. 40% of the time, it basically is only reaching to that.
No, the median is 13 point something seconds. So basically, what I stated was, so what I stated is you will take that path less than 50% of the time.
Yeah, we will even more likely see blocks before 14 seconds most of the time.
And actually, the number's somewhere between, the other part is somewhere between, it's somewhere between 50 and 40%. But I'm just not arguing. I'm just saying it's less than 50, right? Right, but we could pick 40.
And that's just a property of the Poisson distribution.
That is a Poisson's distribution.
And it's a direct function of the time we use to kind of need to see a minimum between these two blocks, right? This is directly the protocol parameters, right? If it's 14, it's only 40% of time we can reach that. It's just always the same distribution.
It is, I think I come back to what Duncan said in the statement. It is basically a first to finish synchronization between a fixed time and a Poisson distribution, which is a Poisson parameter, right? And the parameter as chosen means that basically you will more than 50% of the time another block will reappear, right? So point one.
So an RB. Half the time an RB will appear before the EB has a chance to be incorporated. That's the same.
At least half, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So Right. Now, the point is, when that occurs, the EB is waste. Yeah. Tex?
I apologize. This is actually a clarifying. Are we saying ED like Echo Delta
No,
No,
F-
EB for endorsement block.
endorsement block?
The
Okay.
LEOS terminology here is RB for ranking block, EB for endorsement block, and linear LEOS does not use input blocks anymore, which are
Okay.
IBs.
Gotcha. Yeah. Don't want to go overly crazy, but some things could use to be described. So no worries.
no problem. Right. Right. So we accept that basically 50% of the time, the work being done for all the diffusion will actually be wasted work. Right? Because any other RB generated during that time invalidates the previous EB. Yes?
Yes.
Right. So now,
And there's that opportunity cost as well.
well, we'll get started on opportunity cost in a little while, right? So the next step goes like this of the thinking. Again, I've got to keep my head clear here. Imagine. Okay, so already we're in that position. Now imagine in this situation that you do get to the point where all this RB work has been, all this EB work has been done, right? In the situation where the contents of the EB are at this size, when you get to that point, what the protocol says is you do not generate an RB at that point. You generate a certificate for the previous for the EB that is generated, right? And then any other stuff that you've got, right? You then put into an EB.
You announce another one. Yes.
Okay, right.
Yeah. So the new RB contains not transactions but certificate for the previous EB.
It doesn't contain any, and what's important is it doesn't contain any transactions.
Yeah, I want to add. So I want to add something at this particular thing, right? So there has been some unclarity in the current write-up of the SIP. It's not very explicit that there is no other transactions allowed in the EB when there is a certificate. And it is a bit of a discussion still ongoing, right? Whether this is really mutually exclusive.
Yeah, I understood there was some design decision
but I would
about whether
I would tend. So my current understanding is that it is mutually exclusive because that is more beneficial to reach protocol security, because just we will have more room for the timing constraints to fall into place. If we would allow transactions next to the certificate, the timing constraints are much more stricter because we must have a ledger state ready with all the EBs, all the endorsement transactions already applied in order to validate the remainder of the block.
Okay, I'm slightly surprised that's the reasoning, because my reasoning for this is if you did allow transactions in that RB, you have just presented the ultimate front-running opportunity for dApps, right? But what I'm trying to say is there's basically a whole risk in there by just doing that. And I'm sorry, I really don't want to discuss design decisions here, right? I want to discuss the behavior of the system as documented. And you agree that at present, right, there are no transactions being put in that. In this situation, there's an RB, there's a certificate and an IB, right? I'm discussing right, so we get there. Right now,
I could comment on the front-running opportunity there, though, if you want, but maybe we can also just skip it for now.
Look, the point is, I'm trying to avoid doing that.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm trying to get through what I'm trying to, because the whole point is, going off sideways and appealing to emotionality is not the way I want to do this. I want to do right. Right. So let me ask you. If that was, imagine we've already agreed that more than 50% of the time, this is now behaving just like Praios. It's doing more work, but it's behaving just like Praios. So, yes. So in the situation were we running just Praios, in the situation where the block, it was a block and a unit and a half, 50% of the time, right? It would have followed that route, and those transactions that are in the EB would have actually ended up in an RB anyway, right? All right. Okay. Now let's take the situation where both you compare.
Sorry, Neil, I haven't quite followed that.
I'm just setting up this.
What's the comparison? This RB and a half versus what?
So the point is, the RB and a half, both the Linea-Leos and the Preos behave the same.
But are you imagining Preos with a bigger block size, or what? I've slightly lost track of what your comparison is.
I'm just saying, right? I tell you what, I think it become clear. Let me just do the next bit.
All right.
Well, okay. Now that half imagine you've got the timing behavior, the same timing behavior in both the Preos and the Linea-Leos approach. Okay. At the point where you come to do the voting, and you voted on the EB, if that had been a Preos implementation, all of those transactions that were in that EB would have actually been in that what I forgot what they called in what Preos, but basically the block produced by Preos. Correct? Does that make sense? First of all, does it make sense to you, Duncan? That basically that stuff that was in the EB over there, right, will basically pop up here, right, and it will get it would all of that would have been in this block being produced by here, right? I.e., it's just the same timing. It is absolutely just the same timing as if in that circumstance, and this is why I picked this half block, whether you're doing Preos or Linea-Leos.
So you mean this next half would be in the next Preos block?
Yes.
And in this scenario, you're assuming the mempool didn't grow in the meantime.
Well, I'm about to deal with that point.
Okay.
Right? Because
so if it wouldn't grow, right, we would basically have to...
No, hold, right? First of all, I'm making sure, because actually I'm using Duncan as my muse here, because if Duncan looks like this, then I'm not explaining things well. If he does that, so what I'm saying is that imagine nothing arrives for a second, then basically that second Preos block would have contained the stuff that's in the EB. So it's the timing is identical, in the sense the service time is identical. Yeah.
For that. Yeah. Okay. For those two steps.
But right. Yeah. Imagine more does arrive. Okay. Imagine now it starts to arrive such that it basically starts to have that more has been done in the mempool. In the Preos case, the residual of the mempool or the residual of the block size would have been actually minted at that moment in time, right? Whereas in the Linea-Leos case, they can't be minted at the same time, therefore they are put into the EB. So that other section of that mempool now is experiencing a lower delay, a longer delay.
A higher latency.
A higher latency.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Right, that's my next point. Right, Sebastian?
Yeah. So this is still this at the initial announcement of the first block, let's call it RB1, we announce the on top 50% as an AB, and we had it full with like the transactions. Now, I'm not sure in which scenario you're in. Maybe we can't certify, or we can certify, but I think it's rather cannot certify.
I'm assuming we can certify.
So if we can certify, we had all, okay, so then we had basically the 150% browse at the same timing as you said before, certified in RB2, like on the second block in this chain.
No. It's only half of prowess certified at RB2.
Yeah, I agree. So this is basically, then in RB2, we would have basically the original 150.
It's 50% because the original 100% was already certified. In a sense, it was
okay.
So it's only 50% at this point, right?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. It's not 150%. It's 50%.
Yeah.
What
good.
I'm actually saying is all of the other transactions that arrived during that time are now. Some of them could have been included under Preos, right? They could have been included at that point in time. They can't be included. They have to be put into an EB.
So and then anything and anything that goes into the EB experiences basically an extra block of delay because
at least
at least if it gets incorporated in the next ranking block.
Well, no. Yes, but actually, more importantly, right, what will happen is that you're moving half. I'm using half just as a number, right? You're moving half a block's worth, half a Preos block's worth, or you're not servicing it and you're delaying its service. Now, it could be, it was 50% of the time, the block would go another direction, and therefore it would be incorporated anyway. But 40 or 40, the other side, it's going to be. So am I saying that in this circumstance? Right, sorry, Johnny. Let me just finish this, and I will then yield to you. Okay, right. In this circumstance, the people who arrived between those two blocks will those transactions will experience a longer delay than if they were in Preos. Okay, Johnny.
Or even simpler, anything that makes it into an EB will experience at least one more block worth of delay than anything that would normally make it into a ranking block.
This is now, because it turns out that there's a turning point, right, in this process.
As it gets more overloaded, then that gets higher and higher.
But so I'm trying to describe below that turning point. Johnny,
we should let Johnny go.
Yeah.
So it sounds to me like what you're describing is this potential cascading knock-on effect of the ranking block being used only for certificates, limiting how much can go into your ranking block because it now became 50% of what it could have been under the old system, because there's only 50% of a ranking block into the one that was certified, and then they have to roll over into another EB. So that could continue to happen, and you could end up not having the ranking blocks actually be at capacity.
I'm not willing to make that statement. Right.
Okay. Well, I'm willing to make that interpretation of what you have said so far.
I'm not saying that, right? Because actually, there is a point at which there should be a turning point here, right? At which linear layers may deliver more throughput. And then, if you were to compare, Preos with linear Laos, it would perform better, right? There should be one, and I'm trying to get to the point of when this will happen. Sebastian,
it's a cost benefit analysis, I think, because sometimes it works if there's, because you're giving the very limited example of just half of an existing ranking block, but there are, as Sebastian has said, potential examples where it's way more than that, and then the benefits are higher in those cases. But most of the time, it probably won't be like that. So because of that problem, there's an issue here.
Yeah, no, actually, I'm actually going to be much more. I'm going to try to be more incisive than that, Johnny. Right, you need to realize I'm slowly letting the string out here to tie around and hook. Right, this is not me. I'm not making. I'm slowly making what I'm trying to say here is, as we go through this analysis, I will show, right, that what I think is going to happen is that only under extreme circumstances will actually linear Laos give any benefit. Right. So, right.
Yeah. I feel like that's what I said, but okay.
I'm trying to build this up constructively as opposed to, right, Sebastian.
Yeah, I think you mentioning that turning point is actually what I want to say, right? So I really appreciate this kind of analysis at this exact boundary of where load is like at the limit of Preos, right? There, the servicing would be like there would be no latency increase, where with Laos, we would experience one additional kind of indirection, and exactly in that kind of now maximum load Preos, you will have a kind of longer inclusion latency on Laos. But then as we kind of have more load further than this, which is like kind of not just 100% Preos, right? But a bit more, because what we've been describing so far has been 100% Preos load, because we just happen to have it already a bit over, and then we just add the same thing as what already was there, right? So we cannot just...
Sebastian, this is why I'm doing it by cases, right? Right? You're trying to extrapolate from this point. So now I'm going to start making the next point, right? So the first point I want to make is you accept that basically in this if the mempool is at this position, and it's a position between 1 and 2 times the common block, right? If the mempool is at this situation, right, then basically Preos would have outperformed in this temporal in respect delay Laos, linear Laos. That's what I'm saying. I can show that. That's what I'm saying.
I accept that, and it actually is exactly the case for all kinds of Laos we have analyzed, right?
What?
But
no, I'm
as you're stressing linear Laos, it's kind
no,
of
no, I am stressing linear Laos because you again. I am trying to do a egoless approach to analyzing this problem. I'm not trying to talk about alternatives. I'm taking the two things presented to me and saying this is the comparison of them, right? Because I'm trying to. This is right now. Can I ask? This is to get some understanding of how people understand Poissonness. If the system was at 10% load, right? Would we ever generate an EB?
10% Laos or 10% Preos?
10% Preos load.
Can we make this then in terms, instead of percentages, let's just call it like 1 transaction kilobyte per second data throughput, which is about 20% Preos load, right?
Percentages. Let me explain this, right? What I'm saying is, imagine we have a fundamental. We say 100% is a Preos always being is basically a load. Okay, I'm saying it's a 10% of that Preos load, which is basically where the system is at the moment. Tex.
So I just wanted to clarify here, and I'm putting things together. When we're talking about Laos and Preos, if I remember correctly, and I was just double checking, looks like Laos is the only thing on the chart for delivery, and I thought Preos was put to a back burner. So am I missing something where they're experiencing co-release?
I think you're mixing up Preos and Peras at this point. There's different
That
names.
might be it.
Yeah, Peras
Preos
is
is what you run right now. Preos is
Okay.
the protocol that Cardano uses right now.
Right.
Yeah, and the current parameterization of the Cardano mainnet, given average 20-second block production schedule, right, which is on a long range average, of course, and the 90 kilobyte transaction or 90 kilobyte block bodies will give you an overlong averaged like arithmetic maximum of 4.5 transaction kilobytes, like data throughput, for example.
So go on, Neil, ask your question again, because this sounds like a one of these queuing Poisson questions.
This is one
And
of those.
I think the answer will be that very rarely you will get a full buffer.
Wait,
Not sometimes, but not often.
Right. So the point is, at 10% load, right, will the EBs ever be generated? And Duncan, because he's a SWAT, basically he's doing it right. It will occur, right? So what I'm saying, and it will occur because, it will occur because the Poisson schedule means that in the way this system works, and it's right, the amount of memory, the amount of transactions in the mempool are basically the dominant factor of the exact number at the exact time is not the throughput, it's actually the delay since the previous one occurred.
Right, yes, because it's this bulk service model where you've got Poisson arrival of transactions, which is relatively fine-grained, but then, from time to time, a whole block goes out, but the difference, the variation in those big blocks is quite substantial. So if you have a long period of time between two Poisson blocks being produced, then you'll get a full mempool from time to time.
Okay, so what will happen is, even at 10% load, right? I'm picking 10% because it's ridiculously low, right? Even at 10% load, you'll be doing this with the EBs, and you would be paying these costs. And then the question is going to be, well, how often would there be? Is there even a possibility of linear Laos breaking even? Right, in terms of timing, is the next point. Is the next point I'm going to try and make, Sebastian?
Yeah, that's a very good point. I think I would say that's true, right? I can see that myself too. Maybe the magnitude of what kind of is this work about announcing an AB, voting on it, right, and then not certifying it because it's not actually needed because you have space in browse, right?
Again, Sebastian, right, the opportunity cost metric, we will come to look at that because we're going to analyze that. What we want to do is make sure that the understanding is correct and the model's correct, right? Right? So I'm not, you know, the point is the choice, right? Okay. Now, key question is, how full will mempools be at various loads, given that they're being serviced in various ways, right? Now, it turns out that in the work that we did for Apex Fusion, we built these bulk service model mathematics in order to analyze this problem, okay? And therefore, we can actually quantify how often, based on that number, we can put a finger in the air, right, and get some numbers together as to how often at various loading factors would linear Laos, because I'm actually doing the negative here. Linear Laos is just a cost, right? And a delay, an additional delay. I'm looking, because remember, because what I'm saying is, I'm saying, when will it actually has the capability of giving any benefit? Because what we have just described here is the set of circumstances under which work is done for no end benefit at the moment. Okay.
Is there another? I mean, is there another way to look at this Poisson schedule? Because it's not only this, even with 10% load, right? You sometimes have this kind of bulkiness, but it also means, right, that while 60% of the time we are not even certifying in through Laos, right? There's also these times when there is no block produced for like minutes, right? Or like 1 minute or so, just because it happens. And in those times, even the trickle in of transactions at 10% load can already fill up a mempool higher.
So that's the key intuition.
Could serve, right?
Yeah, that's the intuition as to why you get full mempools even at 10% load. Because the Preos block doesn't arrive for
exactly, but in these situations, right, the endorsement and the certification through it, right, would actually kind of use the time better, right, which you have sometimes.
But it doesn't arrive at the right time, because if you've got like a minute in which nothing happens, it's at that point, at the end of that minute, you've got a very full mempool, but that tells you nothing about what's going to happen afterwards. If you had another minute afterwards, then everything would be great, but it's independent and random.
Yeah, okay, I see that is independent, true, but it's not only bad. That's what I want to say.
You've built up a backlog that you could put into a big EB, but your chance of being able to get a big EB through are still the same as before. And in fact, the bigger the EB, the lower the chance that you get it through, because it increases the time to diffuse. Which changes it from 15 seconds to 16 seconds, and or whatever, and that's why. Yeah. Anyway, I don't know.
Yeah.
Take up more time.
So thank you, Duncan. So the point here is, it's actually the fact that there was a large gap before you generated this has doesn't have any influence on how long the next gap will be. Okay, that's the point. And actually, linear Laos only gains. In order for linear Laos to gain benefit, right, that gap has to be more than 14 seconds, right, which will only happen less than 50% of the time. So what I'm saying is, so it doesn't, what are you going to start, and how often will that occur? How big will that be? This is exactly why I'm referring to this appendix of the linear layer of the Apex Fusion stuff, because that's where we quantified that, okay? What was really interesting in that is that even at offering high loads, huge numbers of transactions were either in the lower or the upper half of the mempool, right? And this lower and upper half of the mempool is equivalent to what I've been saying of 1 to 2 blocks of Krauss. So obviously I'm making a large amount of noise and needing something because my little elf has produced me some lemon tea. Excellent. Thank you, Sally. So what I'm saying is,
Johnny, maybe can we get the hands cleared while you drink?
Yeah.
Go on.
Just my quick check on something, just a sense check. You're talking about the diffusion of the EB. My understanding is the way the diffusion works is to reduce the amount of load to fetch things. Is it's hashing of the transaction in the EB to then people look at their own mempool and only take the gaps. Is that correct?
That's correct. It's an optimistic protocol, right? It's an overlay protocol, so that's why we only would fetch what is still remaining of what was endorsed, which is.
So the difficulty in distributing an EB is in how many gaps might exist between different stake pools and having to fetch the gaps rather than the entire EB. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. And there is always, obviously, an optimistic
viewpoint
on this, right?
The mempools aren't always
most
the
of the time.
Yeah,
but they are quite consistent. Like obviously,
and the higher the load, the less they are like each other.
Yeah, and the more distributed system, also the less they are. And of course, if it is under attack, right, there is some. It's unknown. Nobody knows how much of a mempool kind of partitioning can actually be exerted by a network-based attacker. And maybe, Neil, if you know, I would like to see that data.
I can give you boundary numbers.
Okay.
Right.
I just wanted to make sure that diffusion thing, well, didn't necessarily mean that every transaction had to be fetched across the whole network at all times, just the gaps. But the gaps are significant enough at the high enough load, but then Tex has his hand up.
And you have to validate them all as well.
Yes.
Depends, the voters need to.
The specific concern that was raised earlier was the diffusion. So I just focused on the diffusion. But yes, you're right. You have to validate them all.
Can I just answer, Johnny? So, Johnny, I think the key technical point. I actually begin. The key technical point here is that the cost of having a missed transaction in your mempool when you come to validate an EP will have a particular cost, right?
Oh, yes, and that's a delay.
Right, a round trip time network delay to suitable people. Okay, and that's eating into your time budget of doing validation, right?
Yeah.
Right now, this is actually quantifiable in a sense. I can't say it's 42, but you can probably put some bounds on it with some work, right? And my experience would tell me, because it's not really a guess, my experience would tell me is that those numbers of round trip times compared to each one of those is an extremely expensive operation in terms of the linear progress, right? So it's equivalent to the cache hit misses it's equivalent concept is a cache miss in a processor pipeline, right? Those factors are factors of 300, 400 in caches. They're going to be, we could sit down there. My starting point would be they're at least that order of magnitude in this process too, right? I'm just saying those costs are going to be high, right? They have to be worked out. Tex.
Yeah, sorry, just clarifying today's conversation is just a discussion to better understand what we're looking at, or is there a future state where there's an idea to suggest redevelopment prior to a release?
I'm actually currently working along whether what we're doing is a viable solution.
Okay. I'm going off of what I'm hearing, and what I'm hearing, if I dumb it down, is that this would create an unnecessary slowdown in the network, which would be deemed unconstitutional anyway. So I just want to make sure we're not discussing a moot point.
No. This is yeah. These points. I mean, please, constitutionality. I mean, you mean need to have a discussion about who triumphs, the universe over people. Universe tends to win. We're discussing how the universe is going to constrain this, right? I mean, whether it's constitutional or not, right? But
I do like the angle that you're slowing down people's experience, and therefore that's quite a fancy angle, but it's not the technical.
I hadn't even thought of that as an argument against this, right? My point is, I actually think that this is not. There are a whole bunch of reasons. You have to understand all of the ways it's going to interact, but in order to have that conversation, in a solid way. You actually have to have an agreed model of what's going to behave, what's in scope and out of scope of thinking about. And what I'm trying to do here is define in this region of operation, right? In this region of operation, this is likely what to happen. And so far, right, no one said, no, you're entirely wrong, Neil. Okay, right? Okay, that's what I'm trying to say. And we can then push it further, because the next question comes, at what load, how frequently, how frequently will Preos give benefit? Not Preos, linear layers, some sort of benefit. Now, this then plays into the system has modes in its operation. Yes, and it'd be choosing different. In order for it to be better, it has to be in it. All the preconditions have to be true, and the things have to be true, and all the stars have to align in a particular way for there to be benefit, right? And the other point. So my intention is to try and work this up into some chemical stuff, right? At some point. Now let me finish. So that's and I'm talking to Vashti about that already, because I think that you've already got resources. Now the key point, the second key point I want to make from a systems engineering perspective is that the fact that you are choosing from a probability distribution, and the fact that sometimes it would behave just as neatly as Preos, and sometimes it'll jump off into this behavioral pattern, and actually it's now being randomly decided upon, right, means that the predictability of interaction with this is going to get worse, right? It's not going to be as predictable as we currently have, right? Sorry, got distracted. This is important, right? Because currently, Preos, for all its randomness, is still very predictable. You can bound it and think about it. And basically, how this will show up is in wider distributions of times. And it would also show up in we can actually go to the existing history of the last couple of years and say, how often in the past couple of years would linear Laos, configured in a particular way, have made a potential, had the potential to make improvement, okay, and that we can then work out, were it to be turned on and run for the would it make any difference? And I'm trying to do so. One of the things I'm trying to assess here is, giving it. I'm not saying. I mean, I'm given that because of the nature of the thing, we know that there's a percentage over here when it has a chance to be better. How often would we ever achieve that? Okay. That at this point, that's where I want to stop. I don't want to talk about the attack vectors because they just because basically you have to actually believe and understand this first part before you begin to see how the front running and the attack vectors and how basically you will be unable to. There will be behaviors which will be acceptable inside the protocol, but not but basically, okay, there was one rule that we had. One of the rules we had is that the attacker should have to do at least as much work as you to attack the system, right? I actually think that linear Laos creates an approach where an attacker can do a very large amount cause everybody else to do a large amount of work, right? And therefore disruption. So I actually think that it's not going to be. That's going to be an argument as to whether people accept that risk.
Because opening up a new topic here.
I'm just saying that
kind of resource, like asymmetric resource attacks and so on, is a completely other topic we can also talk about. I wanted to actually comment on really this when does something Laos pay off, right? We now analyze this kind of, I think, boundary load case, which is very interesting to look at, right? So you said before, when the mempool is 1 to 2 blocks full of what we could serve better with prowess load, right? So like 100 to 200% prowess load, we might have a better, it sounds likely, and I think everyone agrees here now, we've been discussing about this, that the service level will be better with just prowess, because we don't do anything additionally, and we don't even try to kind of get things certified and so on. But isn't now, when does it pay off? Isn't it like all the time when it's more than this load in the mempool, when you have like 200, 320,000 times more, or like 2,000% more, or even, right? It's just really complete saturation of the network. There's very high demand. Then it is always better than just not having this very small capacity.
That's also not true, because actually, right, the point is, this is the corollary of at 10% load, right, the system will produce blocks, a small percentage that the mempool will fill up that much. At high loads, the bottom half of the mempool all gets served anyway, right? So this
wait, what is it? Like high load means 20 times more than what the capacity is, what is maybe today.
There is still a fraction. It's not, you haven't flipped completely into the other mode. You are changing probabilities, right?
Yeah, it's a continuous service, I think, turning point, as you called it originally.
That's the point. I wish it was continuous. It's actually non-deterministic, in the sense that when I put my transaction in, I will not be able to know a priori whether I'm going to be putting, whether I'm going to be RB'd, EB'd, or whatever at the point of.
Yeah, but even if like a day before you put the transaction in, you don't know what the demand is going to be tomorrow, right? Of course it is. But the closer we are, at the moment you put it in a mempool, and you having a kind of a good view of the network, then you know what the demand is, and then you know what you can expect.
That is a false statement. Let me explain why. Right? Basically, if this was a situation that we had at the moment, we have had the Cardano Foundation has very kindly, through the auspices of Carl, been running a canary system for the last 2 years, right? And actually, those canaries get delivered 99+% time in one to 2 blocks. Okay, there is about 4 hours in the last 2 years, right, of time in which this basically the system has been that heavily loaded.
Yeah, you're saying there is no demand. I'm not kind of.
No. Again. Look, I'm trying to describe this as a set of facts and information.
Yeah, but looking at the past demand is not a good prediction for the future too, right?
But Sebastian, it's the point. What I'm trying to say here is I'm trying to construct a model of effectiveness, right? And you keep on saying, "Oh, but the past isn't the predictor of the future." The past is a validator of the model. That's the point. The past is a way of taking the common blood, the models we're talking about, and validating them and making sure that they are sound, right? Okay, that's number one. Secondly, what was I going to say?
I mean, let's maybe, do you agree with the Cardano problem statement, which we're trying to solve here? If not, then we should talk about that. Now, next thing is, what is the concrete suggestion you want to put forth on the SIP 164, maybe?
The comparison here is, right, you have got a system at the moment that works chaos. That system could be scaled by just changing parameters.
Not much, but a bit, yeah, probably.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Factor of 2, factor of 5.
Yeah, we looked at this. Yeah, something like that, probably.
Right. You're now. I am saying, if at a factor of 5, just pick a number. Will Linear Laos deliver the sort of service that you could get out of Preos?
So you're saying if we would scale the current system by a factor of 5, that was still kind of doable given the current network topology and all the system behavior, would there still be a benefit in having something like proposed?
Now that would be a nice high-level question to have an answer to.
Yeah, right? And the answer is yes, at very high demands, which is something the community wants to be able to deal with.
Again, you've turned this from, I am not trying to have that discussion. I'm trying to have a good model here because you see, the next thing that's going to happen here, right, is you keep on talking about demand and throughput. And it is, again, my experience of 40 bloody years that that's not actually what the paying customer who has the real money actually needs or wants. What they want is a given quality in a certain quantity. And in this system, quality is the knowing bounds of the timeliness of the transactions to settle. You make that unpredictable, you drive away those customers. That is my underlying, if you want to move this into an economics and usage concern, that's where I come. But I'm trying to get there by showing that actually it's going to be a lot worse. It's going to be worse. I'm trying to stop. And that worseness is going to drive people away.
But the predictability will not be different, right? It will just be,
you just agreed it would be different.
No. So you acknowledge that prowess is randomness, but it can be reasoned about.
No, what you've just agreed is what you just agreed to. This is the point. This is why I'm taking it step by step. What you just agreed to is in a whole region of operation, Payos would deliver things at better delays.
Yeah, but it has no room to grow. So it is not as predictable. If your predictability, so no, Neil, let me finish for once. So if you're a customer, right, and you say, oh, I can get this level of service, but only if it's not overloaded, and it can get overloaded quite easily because we saw it like here, and here in the past.
And the past evidence for that over the last 4 years is zero.
Yeah, because there's also people not wanting to overload the system, right? And there has been demands which would have been served quicker with Leos.
Right.
It's true.
And
maybe Pi knows it. He's an app builder.
The point is, you're turning this into. I'm trying to keep this, as I said at the very beginning, right? I'm trying to turn this into a model of basically trying to how it's going to work, what's the delay going to be like, what's it going to compare with, etc., etc. Because the big people with big money I would say are rational actors, and they will be looking to these numbers. If you give them a system which is more unpredictable than another system, they are not, and when we start looking at the means of what that unpredictability means for them, they are going to basically think twice. So one of my next meta level concern, right, is linear Laos, because it will not have a constrained predictable region of operation and will bounce around between various modes of operation, will actually be, from the point of view of predictability, a lot worse for customers to work with. Duncan, I don't want to take this any further after this.
So, I mean, is it a fair summary here that kind of reflects what both of you are saying? That, I mean, from the simulations in the CIP, it looks like there would be a region beyond the demand that even Prayos with bigger blocks could sustain, that linear Laos would be able to cover, and so. And let's assume for the moment that's the case. Although it can't be too high, because as we see also in the simulations in the CIP, things collapse. Latency goes to pot very quickly once you get above a certain threshold. So I think in the CIP, it's like once you go over about 0.15 transaction megawatts per second, things go bad pretty quickly. But let's assume, so there's that region, right? There's a region in which it has a higher capacity than even big block Prayos, but you can't go too high, right? And maybe that's like 10 times bigger than, but anyway, it doesn't matter.
50 is the kind of order of magnitude we're talking about here.
You can't go to the size of, you can't go to these 12 megabyte blocks. I mean, the I don't want to get sidetracked, but the data, the graphs in the CIP show you can't go that big. I mean, it shows the latency collapses. It goes really
but that latency is, I mean, if you would run it with browser, you would have hours to wait before you kind of get into the mempool, right? So it's not it's kind of the back pressure is the same. It proves that it is kind of back pressure just the same way as browse would be in that load. But I agree that you don't want to get that sidetracked. Sorry.
I might get a framework to have this conversation because I mean I agree with Duncan. I agree with that, and I also think that you are being way overly optimistic about how that's going to work. But I want to get this nicely. I want to get the methodology sorted. So keep on going.
So where I was going with this, I was saying so there's a region in which linear layouts would be able to sustain a higher throughput, although it would have a much more varied latency. And the distribution latency would be much higher. And then in the region below that, which is where historically, Cardano has been, the latencies would be strictly worse. Is that a summary of the argument?
Yep.
And then the question is, is that a tough sell to people? Because your current workload would get worse, but we can support the system running at a higher capacity. And of course, a Preos system running under that high capacity will have very, very high latency because your demand will be higher than supply. Sure.
But the point is, at the point where demand is less than supply for the system, right? Preos, I'm saying it is my estimation that Preos will outperform linear Laos, and actually,
in the sense of time to ledger, time to.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is that there's this mistake that higher throughput will lead to lower latencies. Right, is not always a given, and I think this is one of those examples because it's not a work conserving system where that's going to be the case. And I'm also, and the other thing I want to say is this non-predictability, right, represents a massive technical risk, right? Because what will happen is as you push this system closer and closer to production and you push it towards load, you will not be able to manage this risk manifesting itself. And so, yes, you're going to say, it's manifesting itself. And that means that you are going to, the thing you cannot do in this system, right, is control the individual offered loads. Which is you're gonna, and I'm saying the way you've designed the system, that's the only way you're going to keep it stable, and you can't do it. But that's a future discussion once we've sorted out the fact that we believe each other, right, on how it's going to perform. Then we can have that next level of discussion of how you manage and control this problem. And I'm basically, from a systems engineering perspective, you have put yourself between a rock and a hard place. And I think, I think you're going to get squashed. That's my problem, right?
So what Duncan said before, it's strictly having worse performance in Preos loads. I'm not sure if I can follow that, or I don't agree there, because this is only the case when the additional work, which you claim to be like monumental, actually prevents for Preos to be otherwise functioning at that loads, no?
So the where it's strictly worse, I think we agreed earlier, was where it could be serviced by Preos, where it's within the capacity that Preos could serve.
And we need to go through a certification because of the Poisson schedule.
There's anything that ends up in an EB experiences one extra block of delay. But yeah, then you can go bigger, obviously, and then when your EBs are substantially larger than RBs, then you have the potential for higher throughput, and then of course, in situations where the demand is higher than what Preos could service, then the time from when you want to submit your transaction to when it gets in could be lower.
I mean, the summary would then be, right, so that there is strictly a lower level of service, like transaction inclusion delays, for example, because of this. It can happen even on small loads that something needs to go through the EP being certified, and then it has a longer latency. Mm-hmm. So basically, but this is also going to be a percentage, right? It's not going to be like a majority, right? So it's a slightly less good operating in. There's an overhead. Let's call it an overhead, right? In this level of operation, but which buys us the potential to actually have much better service quality on very higher loads, right?
Let's quantify all of this, right? Because if we end up in the position, look, let me say, if the overhead pays benefit 50% of the time, there's no argument. If the overhead gives benefit 0.05% of the time, there is an argument, right? Okay? I was choosing those numbers because actually then you work it out. And I think that because of that argument, and as soon as you start placing the argument out, right, then you'll be able to talk about, well, it's going to cost more, says the SPOs. When am I going to see a benefit? Oh, I'm going to see this. You now be able to, you're now able to say, will I ever see in the timescales of interest and you start having a model where you can start quantifying all of this stuff that people are just, it could. I totally agree. It could be 1 million times more load. Actually, I don't totally agree, because if you look, you then can start doing comparators. Like, if you were able to process all of the UK's financial transactions, is that a reasonable scale? Which I would say yes. For a global system that could do something the size of the UK, those numbers are quantifiable, right? So you talk about scaling 1,000
So,
right? I'm saying this is not something that we are going to. I'm going to suggest.
so, but we will come around to whatever model we're talking about. We come around to, like, it's probably always a bad idea to prepare for something which is not even needed, because you will not have the potential to do more throughput with zero overhead, right? I mean, in a kind of that the system kind of adapts automatically to it, right? In a non-steered way.
What I said in the video, you're now trying to do there's a word for this type of argument, but what I said in my little video previous, in the system engineering, what you're trying to do is that the cost of processing a unit of work is the same at 10% as it is at 90%, right? And what I'm saying is that's what you're trying to do. And what you've done, what you're saying is this system doesn't behave that way, and that was the big bloody alarm bell that went off in my head, right? As soon as you make a system in which it costs more, the more work you do, the unit cost goes up by work, you do not have an implicitly scalable system. Full stop.
Yeah, I mean, you can have it not be a flat function. I mean, like the full Laos has a fixed overhead, and then that means that it gets more efficient as you increase the load, and it's relatively inefficient at low load because.
But this is the same. This is exactly the same relation we have here.
No, because the bigger your EBs, the more often you lose them.
That's not true.
Well,
that's the timing.
That's what the charts show, right? I mean, that's why the time for transactions to reach the ledger gets like ridiculous as you've got, like, look at figure 9.
I mean, every system has a limit which you can perform, right? And that graph just shows, like, how does it behave with this kind of demand, right?
No, because this is not showing a system that is operating beyond its demand.
It is. It's having more demand than it can serve. There's going to be back pressure.
All right, this is the fundamental system.
No, it's not. That's not what it's showing. That's showing the system performing within its demand, but having very, very high latency, right? So if you looked at if the behavior under Preos, if you had a system that can accept, a certain number of transactions per second, it's a very, very simple model, not even up to blockchain, and you're producing them higher than that, the time that you experience, the time to get included grows unboundedly over time, right? But in this plot, it is stabilizing. I mean, maybe it's not running for long enough to be able to see where it stabilizes.
The fidelity is probably lacking there too, right? And the parameters are not perfectly tuned, right? Could also be that the size of EB chosen, the maximum closure chosen, is a bit too big for.
It does look
too
big. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's my point. That was why I was saying it looks to me like you can't go above 0.15 TX megabytes per second, because and presumably the reason that it starts to fall apart when you get too big is because you get more and more EVs taking you get bigger EVs taking longer to get across the network, longer to be validated, and therefore the votes longer to make it. And then whenever an EV gets missed, you have then more demand, which means the next EV is also huge, and so you get the same problem again the next time around, and that has a knock-on effect, and so you get you get very high latencies. Only occasionally do you get an enormous EB manage to make it in time. So on those occasions when Preos puts a large gap between your blocks.
So the point is, an ideal system has this nice 45-degree line, and when you hit its capacity, it stays at that point, right?
Yeah.
That's the ideal, right? Okay. Now what we're saying is that this is that right. Wonderful. That is doing right, but that is not. You haven't actually restricted the demand now.
No, we did.
It's turning over, right? It's turning over. That's the point.
No, this is still running, right? So we're doing the long simulations now, and there is some noise here because of sortition, right? Because sometimes it is kind of a bit bad on us, sometimes a bit better, like on us, right? But it's just normal, right?
Right? No. The point is, this is what we have to turn around.
Yeah, this is what we're doing now. Kind of like, I mean, there's been good feedback here too, right? Saying like, oh yeah, okay, we should really have a look in how the saturation happens, because figure 9 is not that good of a model for it to kind of really get there.
We'll come back to the point I said in the beginning, right? We said earlier. If the delay is not predictable, I'm actually going to say that there is a non-trivial percentage of applications for which this system is not fit for purpose.
Sebastian, in that chart you just showed us, that's an aggregate over a long period. It doesn't show what figure 9 shows, which is the latency that individual transactions experience. So I don't disagree.
Also it's a histogram of transactions there too in figure 9, yeah. It's overall, right? Overall transactions.
But it shows
it's showing the timing of individual transactions.
Showing the throughput.
Whereas you were showing us the throughput. So my point was that was a system that was running within its capacity, in that it
was the same system, right? Just what we just saw on the thing. It was exactly the same simulation.
Our point is that the delays are unpredictable. And that's my point at this point, right? This is the meta, is that a system that delivers unpredictable delays is not a system that people use. You know,
I do agree on this one. Right?
Any transport, think about it, all right? And if you were going to spend money, if you're going to do this, and at the end of it, you end up with something that people are going to walk away from. So then that's not a good use of time and money.
So is maybe a concrete. Now let's try to make the constructive feedback, right? You would like to see kind of the histogram like figure 9, but on a high load, which kind of doesn't leak.
I want a logical argument that says I'm wrong. That's what I'm looking for.
No, we're looking for evidence and not for arguing like who's wrong or what not.
No, a logical argument based on that. No. I don't think you understand the word argument in this context, right? I am proposing a set of properties that I believe the system will have. So far, no one has told me that I am wrong. Right, I am saying that when you extrapolate this property, you end up with this randomness in timing, or this unpredictability in timing. Simulations do not disprove. If you're going to disprove me, I'm saying I am placing a solid peg in the ground, and you're saying, oh, we can get around it, and I'm saying you can't. Right, that's my point, and in these battles, I typically will offer crates of beer and crates of whiskey and all the rest of it. And in 40 years, I've not paid up. Okay? I'm just saying, and I'm trying to avoid that.
Can you suggest something? I mean, can you help us in making it better then?
I don't understand it well enough yet.
Can I say something before I have to go at the top of the hour?
But we should wrap it up anyways.
But maybe next time. I mean, something that I was thinking about, which is it's not the same issue that Neil's worrying about here, but it's more of a kind of big picture strategy question. And I don't think we'll have time to discuss it, but I thought it might be useful just to raise the thought. So I guess the worry is that we're building in the best case, we're building a system that can do a kind of intermediate level of capacity, right? That's bigger than, let's say, big block Preos, where Neil and I reckon we could be able to increase 5 times the block size or something under Preos. And so this linear Laos would give us something bigger than that, but not too big. That's the compromise it's making, right? Thereby not having full scaling and concurrency and the rest of it. And so that buys you, an intermediate amount of time in like, the potential of Cardano to become big and successful and the rest of it. But it's not clear to me that we're getting any closer to the time when we could actually achieve scaling, right? Because as I understand it, the concern that people expressed to the Laos development team, which I think actually is not very well reflected in the CIP or something that has been brought to the TSC or for the, but it was just directly between, but put that one to a side. So there was a change of strategy from let's go for something big and scalable, because there was a concern that people would not be ready in time. And so we do this thing that's sort of intermediate, right? But doing that thing that's intermediate does not get us closer to those people who are deploying apps and wallets and whatever being ready to do something scalable. Like if you're going to do an intermediate point, okay, it increases the throughput, but it still doesn't get us.
Where do we need to go?
Assuming the CPS is, I'm still assuming the CPS is what we want, that we want to be able to get to a stage where we can have a scalable design where we can get to, more than 100 TPS in some reliable way.
Yeah, basically one of the motivations is economic sustainability. I know there's different ways to go about it, right? But just not changing the structure of the network.
But it's not at all obvious that this would get us there. That we would. This is an intermediate point, before getting to.
No, it is actually saying like in order to have economic sustainability, kind of has been now then looked at. Okay, what does it mean? Like have the same number of SPOs roughly, right? With the similar or kind of slightly, maybe if there is changed hardware, kind of cost need to be covered, and the same kind of profitability, not coming from the reserves, but coming from fees, right? That is the argument around it, and that is achieved with like is it 80 transaction kilobytes per second or so mere data throughput with the current fee structure, right? Excluding Plutus, for example, right? So we're talking about a break even of like 50.
Right. So you might be able to get to that point, but I think there was an ambition to be able to have something that could genuinely scale. And my concern is that by going to this intermediate point, we don't actually get any closer to that, because you would say, oh, we can't do that now because it'll take SPOs and DApps and whatever more than 2 years to adapt. But if you don't start, it's 2 years down the line, it'll still take them 2 years to adapt or 3 years to adapt, or more than we have, So we're not actually making progress is my concern towards something that's genuinely scalable, right? I can see the argument for having an intermediate point, and I can see that the argument that by building linear Laos that has many of the pieces of full Laos, it gets you closer on the development to. But that was not the thing that made us change strategy. The thing that made you change strategy was users weren't ready. So where is the strategy to move towards something that could be scalable in the end, that encourages users to make the changes that they would need to get us to a scalable, end goal?
Yeah,
that's my worry. And I don't have time but maybe that's something really, you can think about, and maybe that's something that we could discuss.
So
it's a big picture strategy question.
It would be very good to have that one reworded, reiterated on the rationale of the SIP, because this is really saying, why is this a good step?
Yeah, why is an intermediate? Right? Why is this a right?
Why is this even a good step to take for the Cardano community now, right? And this is basically exactly the argument, which should be there if you're missing something, really having a comment there and a thread.
So I'll try and put this down as a comment on the.
Which is different to your previous input we also received, well, right? So
yeah, I was just sort of low level stuff.
Exactly. So
I'll try and.
We don't need to discuss it now, but okay.
Yeah,
let's have it.
All right, I need to go because I've got to go for.
I need to go as well, because actually these things need to be said and thought about and then come back to. We can't resolve them now, right? We have to. All right then. Great conversation.
Yeah, thank you, Sebastian.
Really looking forward to the video recording, please. I'll advertise it as well. Cheers, guys.
Yeah, but maybe we can also do it written in the future.
Written, absolutely, but in the future, right? Because actually, I'm up to here. As usual, I'm up to here, right? That's the problem.
Yeah. See you.